lost our ambition, our imagination, and our willingness to do the things that built the Golden Gate Bridge and Hoover Dam and unleashed all the potential in this country.
Well, small business owners not agreeing with the president, saying their biggest problem isn't ambition, it's our regulation nation. A new poll showing that is their #1 concern. So who has it right, the president or the people on the front lines? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Mike Kozanian, Victoria Barrett, Elizabeth McDonald, Morgan Brennan, Mark Tatge, Kim McNicholas. We got a full house. Mike, first to you. Who has it right?
Well, small business has it right, David. If you look at the new Dodd-Frank bill, it's killing the banking industry. You see all the layoffs there. There's no revenue growth in that industry. It's killing energy. The EPA is attacking companies. If you look at Luminant, which is a Texas company that feeds much of the energy grid in Texas, it's shutting 2 plants because of new EPA regulations. Over 500 employees it's going to have to lay off. We're way over-regulated. The Heritage Foundation, David, estimates that regulations extract over $1 trillion from our economy every year.
All right, but Kim McNicholas, the Treasury Department, just came out with a report saying the opposite. That, and I'm quoting from Jan Eberle here, who works for the Assistant Secretary, says 2 commonly repeated misconceptions are that uncertainty created by proposed regulations is holding back business investment and hiring. So the White House is saying it's not a problem.
No, I mean, if you think about it, corporate America raked in more than $900 billion since the recession. Certainly, the larger companies do, in fact, have the money to hire. The problem is that there's too much economic uncertainty. They've learned to do more with less. I mean, how can they convince their shareholders that they should hire more people when they've increased productivity, they increased profitability since the recession? And then finally, skilled workers are a problem. I mean, if you're here in Silicon Valley, which Obama, by the way, President Obama did visit over the past couple of months.
Well, that doesn't make him an expert.
A couple of times, which surprises me why he would say there's a lack of ambition. But needless to say, they do need more skilled workers in terms of
All right,
engineers.
well, we need more speakers in here. Victoria, I want to get to you after having quoted one of these academics in the Treasury Department. I have to ask you, who knows more about small business, an academic in the Treasury Department or small business people?
I think it's fair to say small business people. And, you know, the same surveys that show their concern about excessive regulation also show concern about consumer confidence and the ability to get investment capital. So these are all issues. I think the regulatory burdens are feeding people's fears about the future. I mean, you look at everything this administration does, it's aimed in a way at picking winners and losers. So we had a few months ago this whole idea of we're going to create this program called Startup USA, Startup America, and we're going to hire these people and they're going to stoke innovation. But if you read the fine print, it was innovation in clean tech. It was innovation in underserved markets. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, that's just red tape.
Right.
It's the government telling me which businesses I should go in, which businesses I shouldn't go in.
Mark, if you are a journalist, which you and the rest of us are, I mean, you go to the front lines to get a story of what's really happening on the ground. And in the front lines, 22% of the businesses put regulation as their #1 impediment.
And that's what I don't understand, David. I mean, to put this in perspective, let's look at, we've had 20 years of deregulation. We've deregulated the airlines, trucking, electric utilities, natural and oil and gas. And still, businesses are complaining about too much regulation. What is the result of this, Ben? We have a situation where we have higher prices, services declined, and we have more concentration of business than ever before. So deregulation has really not brought us a whole lot. And in terms of the Dodd-Frank bill, hey, Volcker proposed a 10-page rule. And what's happened is the lobbyists from industry have turned it into a 290-page rule.
EMAC, that always happens.
And
that's why,
okay,
Mark, we get it.
EMAC,
the point is that always happens when you propose new regulatory systems like Dodd-Frank, which is, what, 2,300 pages of regulations. All the lobbyists get in, and it suddenly becomes like 10,000 pages.
Yeah, the issue is not rules. It's the issue there's no shortage of rules. It's a shortage of enforcement. And even Ben Bernanke himself said of Dodd-Frank,
agree.
You know, wait a minute. We can't even figure out. It's just way too complicated, the impact. The president's own jobs council said rules are a problem. The president himself has said that rules are a problem. And when you look at what the red tape, we're talking about the red tape that small businesses had to contend with. Just look at the 1099 rule that they wanted to install to report goods and services for small businesses of $600 or up. So what we're talking about is the city of Milwaukee. You have to get a license to go out of business in Milwaukee. If you run a daycare center in Massachusetts, your children have to brush their teeth after lunch. It's red tape like that is strangling businesses in this country and hurting job growth.
And Morgan, again, I go back to the small businesses. Those are the people who know best what is hurting their ability to grow and hire people.
Look, I'm not going to argue the fact that regulations have a much larger effect on small businesses than they do on larger corporations. And yeah, regulations are part of this whole economic puzzle right now. But I would argue that consumer demand is actually the bigger issue that's affecting all businesses in our country right now. We have weak GDP. A big portion of that is from consumer spending. And you have companies like General Electric and Weight Watchers and all of these other companies who are hiring. They're just doing so overseas. Regulations plays a small part in that, but consumer demand in places like China, where it's stronger, plays a much bigger part.
But, Mike, you look at what the EPA is doing, and certainly in the energy field, they have stopped a lot of jobs being created, whether it's in the Gulf or whether it's in coal mines in West Virginia or whether it's in fracking projects, et cetera.
Yeah, companies are shutting coal plants. And to go back to weak consumer demand, of course, look, up the 15 years through 2007, 64% of the jobs came from small businesses. The last year has seen zero net gain in small businesses, and that's because they're overregulated.
And, Kim, I have talked to many small business owners, particularly small banks, who say that the Dodd-Frank bill, this big new regulatory bill for financial institutions, is preventing them from making loans to small business. And if small businesses don't get the loans, they don't hire more people.
Yeah, let's take a look at those loans. I mean, how much are these banks getting these loans from the federal government? Close to zero. And then they're turning around and charging these small businesses.
Those are the big banks.
6% interest rates.
Hold on, Kim. I got to defend the small banks because you're talking about the big banks. I agree with you as far as the Morgan Stanleys and Goldman Sachs, but the small banks are getting killed.
You know what? I don't know as much about the small banks as I do the larger ones, and I know in terms of the larger ones, they do need stricter regulations in order to help some of these other businesses.
Hold on a second.
Hold on a second.
EMAC, the point is that the small banks don't have all of those friends, those lobbyist friends that Mark Tatge was talking about. They don't have the cutaways that the big banks do, and they're getting screwed.
You know, that's right, David, and that's why the president's own jobs council said, let's exempt those small banks with $1 billion or less in assets. The overall problem with government rulemaking is it incentivizes government growth. You got to have bureaucrats to oversee those rules. Meanwhile, you can shoot an arrow down a government hallway and not hit anybody to find somebody to enforce it.
Victoria, go ahead, Vicky, go ahead.
David,
hold on. Vicky, go ahead.
Banks to get too big.
The other side is for all these banks. They need to spend a ton of money hiring lawyers and lobbyists to make sense of this stuff. I mean, even the New York Times is calling it Dodd-Frank Inc. I mean, it's a new industry that's being created. If you're a derivatives lawyer, you're in heaven right now. You're getting a job offer.
One at a time. Mike Ozanian, go. Mike Ozanian, go.
Mark, Congress writes the legislation, not the lobbyists. But the impact on small businesses is that when new regulation comes in, big businesses can pass along a lot of the costs, but those costs get passed along to small businesses.
Guys, we got to leave it at that. We have run out of time. In fact, we ran out of time about a minute ago.